welcome to the Target UPSC Prelims 2024 series, and this is the economy episode 5 which we will be covering today. So let's begin. So first topic is the Gresham's law and the currency exchange rate. So let's first see why is it in news. So in 2022 economic crisis in Sri Lanka. So we all know that Sri Lanka is going through a major economic crisis, and it has been around 3 to 4 years that Sri Lanka is going through this economic crisis. Its whole economy is disrupted, which highlighted Gresham's law's impact on currency exchange rate. So the Central Bank of Sri Lanka's decision to fix the exchange rate between the Sri Lankan rupee and the US dollar drew attention. So this brings Gresham's law and the currency exchange rate to the news with regard to Sri Lanka. Now first of all, what is Gresham's law? So the line which denotes Gresham's law is that bad money drives out good money. So this states that bad money drives out good money. So the bad money which is in the economy, it will drive out the good money. So it says that the inferior currency replaces the superior currency due to people's tendency to hoard valuable money. So this says that if there are two types of currency, this is 1, this is 2, and currency 1 has less value as compared to currency 2. So currency 2 has more value, it means currency 2 is more valuable. So people will hoard currency 2 because it holds more value, and they will use currency 1 earlier because it has less value. So this will be the bad money which has less value, and 2 is the good money which has more value. So the inferior currency replaces the superior currency. So on the one go, people will use the first currency as compared to the second currency due to people's tendency to hoard valuable money, and they will keep the second currency with themselves because it is more valuable. This occurs when governments fixed exchange rates create a disparity between official and market rates. So whenever we talk about the exchange rates, so exchange rate means, see, imagine this is one country, this is another country, and if one country is India, second country is US, so India has rupee, US has dollars. So imagine 1 rupee is equals $1 is equals to 80 rupees. So $1 is equals to 80 rupees. So this is the exchange rate, that if we will go and buy $1, then we will have to spend 80 rupees. So this is the exchange rate. This is what is called the exchange rate between two countries, that if we want a US dollar, we will have to spend 80 rupees. When we will spend 80 rupees, then we will get 1 US dollar. Now instances of Gresham's law in action. So during Sri Lanka crisis, despite market suggesting a higher value for the US dollar, the central bank fixed the exchange rate. So fixing the exchange rate means that the value between the Sri Lankan rupee and the US dollar is fixed, even though it changes, but it will remain fixed in Sri Lanka because the Central Bank of Sri Lanka has fixed that exchange rate. Because exchange rate is of multiple types, like for example, it is fixed, it is floating, and then it is managed. So fixed is when the central bank of a country fixes the exchange rate and it does not change, while floating exchange rate means that it is denoted by the market factors or the market forces. Like for example, today if $1 is equals to 80 rupees, tomorrow it can be $1 equals to 82 rupees. So on the basis of those market forces, it will keep on changing. While India follows the managed floating rate, it means that there is a certain limit which fixed, under which if things are going on, then it will be fine, but if above that the breach will be done, then the Central Bank of India will intervene. So it is not that it is completely fixed, and it is not even completely floating. So this led to an overvalued Sri Lankan rupee and an undervalued US dollar, reducing its use in transactions, and as a result, Sri Lanka did not have any forex reserve. Then contrast to Grisham law is the Thayer's law. So Thayer's law talks about good money drives out bad, while Grisham's law talked about that bad money drives out good. So Thayer's law, which is good money drives out bad, it is an example of displacement of government issued currency by private cryptocurrencies. So when private cryptocurrencies came into the nature, this is what it did. Now what is a fixed exchange rate? So it ties a currency's exchange rate to another currency's exchange or gold prices to maintain value stability. And it means it keeps it fixed. It was established at the Bretton Woods Conference in the year 1944, pegged currencies to the US dollar. Then advantages and disadvantages of fixed exchange rate. So it is advantages and disadvantages of fixed exchange rates. So let us first understand the advantages. So advantages, it provides price stability because the exchange rate is fixed. So stability can be maintained. It is not changing on regular basis. Reducing inflation risk. Then it reduces transaction cost for international trade. So transaction cost is reduced because the price does not fluctuate on daily basis. Then it boosts investors' confidence in a stable currency. So if it will not be denoted by the market forces, then stability could be maintained, and if stability is maintained, then the investors' confidence will increase in the system. Now few of the disadvantages is that the countries give up monetary policy autonomy, affecting domestic economic needs, because the monetary policy autonomy is not maintained. It is the central bank which decides everything. Then vulnerable to speculative attacks, which depletes foreign exchange reserves, because if it will be fixed, then the bad money will keep on performing better over the good money, which will lead to the depletion of the foreign exchange reserves, because the country will not realize that their good money is moving out. Then it ties a country's fate to the stability of the anchor currency issuer, impacting economic stability. So the stability of the currency is maintained. So that is also a negative, because that will overall affect the economic stability of the economy, because the foreign exchange will deplete. Now alternatives to fixed exchange rate, that is the floating exchange rate. So floating exchange rate is determined by the supply and demand in the market, allowing currencies to adjust freely with regard to the market forces, and it is not fixed, and it provides flexibility and responsiveness to economic conditions, because as the global economy will be performing and the global market will be performing, it will depend and it will fluctuate on the basis of market. Then the examples include Canada and Australia, which have flexible exchange rate systems. So Canada and Australia have flexible exchange rate systems. Then comes the managed floating rate, and that is the central bank intervenes to manage currency value within a certain range. So a certain range is decided on the under which, if things are, then it is under control, and if things breach that mark, then the central bank will intervene in between, and this offers some flexibility while stabilizing exchange rate. So a flexibility will also be offered. Examples include India and China, which employ managed float exchange rate systems. So India follows the managed exchange rate system. Then second comes RBI to discontinue ICRR. RBI is the Central Bank of India, that is the Reserve Bank of India, and ICRR stands for I for incremental, CRR is cash reserve ratio. So it was in news because recent announcement by the Reserve Bank of India regarding the phased discontinuation of the incremental cash reserve ratio. So the ICRR will be discontinued in a phased manner. Now, how will the RBI implement discontinuation of ICRR? So the central bank will release the amount that banks have maintained under ICRR in stages. So it will release the amount that banks took when under the ICRR. So in the first and second stages of the ICRR reversal, 25% of each of the bank's impounded funds will be released. So 25% will be released in the first and the second stages, while the remaining 50% of the balance will be released in the third stage. So first and second stage 25% each, and third stage will be the 50%, remaining 50%. Then this measured approach aims to ensure a smooth transition and prevent sudden shocks to the system's liquidity. So it will follow a smooth transition so that no sudden shocks can be given or can be taken by the economy. The strategy is devised to provide sufficient liquidity for meeting increased credit demand during the upcoming festival season. Now, what is important is this, that what is ICRR? That is incremental cash reserve ratio. So what is it? So it was introduced in August 2023 following the announcement of the monetary policy and the demonetization of rupees 2000 notes. So this is the time when it was introduced in the year 2023. So it is not very old. So banks were required to maintain an incremental CRR of 10%. So we all know that CRR is cash reserve ratio, and every bank reserves a certain amount in cash, that can be 4% or 5% with the RBI. So that percentage increased to 10%. So the banks were required to maintain an ICRR of 10% on the increase in their NDTL. And what is NDTL? It is the difference between the sum of demand and time liabilities of a bank and the deposits in the form of assets held by other banks. So how much assets they are keeping, and stated that it would review it in September 2023 or earlier. So it is the increasing the CRR value. Now purpose of introducing the ICRR is, it is a temporary measure. So remember this, that it was not a permanent measure, it was a temporary measure to manage excess liquidity in the banking system. So when the discontinuation of 2000 rupee note took place, so what happened, that all the people who were having the 2000 rupee note in the market, they came to the bank to deposit the 2000 rupee note. Now when they came to deposit the amount, now banks suddenly has a excess liquidity because too much money was coming to banks. So how will banks manage all this? So bank decided to increase the CRR, and that became ICRR. And it was aimed to absorb over rupees 1 lakh crore of excess liquidity, 1 lakh CR. And the surplus liquidity resulted from various factors including demonetization, surplus transfer to the government, increased government spending and capital inflows. Then it necessitated efficient liquidity management to prevent disruption of price stability and financial stability, so that price stability and financial stability should not be disrupted. Now impact of ICRR on liquidity conditions. So what is the impact of ICRR? So it absorbed over rupees 1 lakh CR of excess liquidity from the banking system, and it allowed the banking system to work smoothly. Then initially it led to liquidity deficit exacerbated by outflows related to goods and services tax and central bank intervention, and liquidity conditions returned to normal afterwards. So when all the amount came to the bank suddenly, bank also increased its CRR reserve. So at one point of time there was excess inflow of amount into the bank, and then when bank reserved it, so bank also for some time had a money crunch. But what happened was, because of this process, the stability and the continuity in the economy maintained. Now what is CRR? That is the cash reserve ratio. So what is it? So it is the percentage of cash reserve which is required to be kept against the bank's total deposit. So whatever is the total deposit of the bank, so as some percentage of it, you can say 4% of it or 5% of it in the form of cash needs to be kept. All banks in India except the regional rural banks and the local area banks have to deposit the CRR money to RBI. So all the banks, scheduled commercial banks, except the RRB, that is the regional rural banks, and the LAB, that is the local area banks, except these banks, every bank has to deposit that certain amount of money of their NDTL to the RBI. Now banks can't lend the CRR money to corporates or individual borrowers. So banks cannot lend this money, and they can't use that money for investment purposes, and they do not even earn any interest on it. So they do not earn any interest on it. It means that the amount which the bank is keeping with the RBI in the form of cash, bank is not getting any interest on it. Very important point for you to remember. Then CRR helps in keeping inflation under control and managing liquidity in the banking system, because it provides a cushion to the banks that in case of any crunch or in case of any shock, this can be used. Then why is RBI using ICRR in the case of demonetization? So the implemented ICRR during demonetization to manage sudden influx of liquidity when there was too much money coming suddenly, so that needs to be managed smoothly. Precision and quick implementation crucial during unique situations like demonetization. So a situation like demonetization does not happen on regular basis. It happens once in a decade or 2-3 decades. So to handle this situation, a calculated risk needed to be taken. Intended as a temporary measure and phased out once liquidity stabilizes. So a permanent solution should not be there, because the process of demonetization was also for a certain period of time. So a temporary measure needed to be taken, and that temporary measure can also get things back to normal as early as possible. Then what are the monetary policy instruments available to the RBI? Monetary policy instruments. So there are two types, that is qualitative measures and quantitative measures. We will not be going into detail of all these, but qualitative measures are moral suasion, direct credit controls, selective credit controls, influence lending behavior, and target specific sectors to achieve policy objectives. Then comes the quantitative instruments. So these are very important. These are the topics from where the questions can be asked. That is the cash reserve ratio we just studied. Then repo rate, that is the repurchase rate, the rate at which RBI gives loan to the banks, or reverse repo rate, that is vice versa of repo rate. Then bank rate, the rate at which bank lends. Open market operations, this happens selling of securities and buying of securities. Liquidity adjustment facility, marginal standing facility rate, it means taking money on urgent basis. Statutory liquidity ratio, that is SLR. These are quantitative measures. Next comes the cotton production in India. So why is the cotton production in India in news? So the declining trend. So there is a declining trend which is observed in the cotton production and yield, which has recently garnered attention, presenting significant challenges for India's agriculture and textile sectors. So cotton production has decreased. Then what is the significance of cotton for India? So that is, cotton holds a pivotal position in India's agricultural landscape, and it contributes around 25% of the global cotton production. So out of the total global production, that is 100%, 25% is what India is contributing. So 1/4 of the global production India is contributing of cotton, and it is often referred as the white gold because it looks white in color. So it is often referred to as the white gold, and its economic importance underscores its significance as a major cash crop. India's cotton cultivation is diversified, with about 67% grown in rain-fed areas and the remaining 33% in irrigated regions. So overall, we can say that India is one of the major producers of cotton in the world. Then the growing conditions. So what kind of or what type of conditions cotton requires for its growth? So cotton thrives in a hot, sunny climate. So it requires a hot, sunny climate with a extended frost-free period, making it most productive in warm and humid conditions. So the basic condition which the production of cotton requires is hot conditions, warm conditions, and its adaptability extends to various soil types including well drained alluvial soil, black soil, and mixed black and red soils. Alluvial soil, black soil, and mixed black and red soils. Now, species of cultivated cotton. So India boosts cultivation of all 4 species of cultivated cotton, that is 4 species of cultivated cotton, that is Gossypium arboreum, Gossypium herbaceum, Gossypium barbadense, and Gossypium hirsutum. So these are the 4 different types of cotton species. I know the pronunciation is little difficult. So the major cotton producing states are, that can be clustered into 3 different agroecological zones, and that can be northern, central, and southern. So northern India, southern India, and central India. So you can say that basically it is happening in one direction, that is northern, southern, and central. East and west is missing. Now, significance of cotton. So beyond its role as a textile fiber, cotton serves as a vital source of food and feed. Vital source of food and feed. Cotton commands a substantial share in India's textile fiber consumption and plays a critical role in the country's textile industry. Then cottonseed, which is a byproduct, yields oil. So it also yields oil, which is used for cooking and frying. So this is also a use of it. Now, rapid increase and subsequent decline in cotton production. Let's look at this. So the advent of BT, that is Bacillus thuringiensis. So the advent of BT technology spurred a surge in cotton production from 2000 to 2001 to 2013-14, resulting in heightened lint yields. Then post 2013-14, the onset of pink bollworm infestations triggered a decline. So it is because of the BT cotton and then the pink bollworm, because of which the decline was triggered, adversely impacting both cotton production and quality of cotton. So it is because of the first BT cotton, then pink bollworm. So first, that is BT cotton technology. So what it did was, because of it the production increased, and then till the time of 2013-14, after which came the pink bollworm. And pink bollworm, after the time period of 2013 and 14, when the surge in the cotton production, it stopped, and from this time period the cotton production started to decline. Then comes next, that is other issues associated with the cotton sector. So what are the other issues? First is the yield fluctuations. So fluctuations in yield persist due to various factors, that is including limited irrigation access, because we all know that till now India is very much dependent on rainfall for its crop production, and irrigation is limited in our country. So the areas where irrigation is not good, so they tend to suffer when the rainfall is not good. And then comes the point of soil degradation. So if the soil is not good, then production will suffer. Then erratic weather patterns. This is related to the rainfall patterns and also with regard to the floods and the drought areas. Then the dominance of small scale farmers primarily employing traditional agricultural practices, which poses challenge to modernization and technological adoption. So any modern technique becomes very difficult to adapt, because the people who are already working on the fields, they're not ready to adopt the new technology. Then the limited market access remains a concern, often resulting in cotton growers selling their produce at below market rates, because the market they have access to is very limited. So the limited market access is also becoming a problem. Then comes next, and that is the International Organization of Legal Metrology, that is OIML. So why was this in news? So India has become the 13th country which is capable of issuing OIML certificates. So India has now become capable of issuing OIML certificate, and the Legal Metrology Division, which is Department of Consumer Affairs, is now authorized to issue OIML certificate. So it is the Department of Consumer Affairs which will be issuing the certificate. Now what is legal metrology? So it is a branch of metrology which is focusing on regulation and legislation. So regulation and legislation concerning measurements and measuring instruments. Regulation, legislation, and it will be talking about the measurements and measuring instruments. And the aim is to ensure accuracy, consistency and fairness in commercial transactions and other critical areas. Accuracy, consistency and fairness. Now let's talk about the primary objective, and that is to protect interests of consumers and producers by establishing clear and uniform standards for measurement. So interest of the consumers should be protected. Then next is the International Organization of Legal Metrology. So it was established in the year 1955, and its headquarters is present in Paris, and it develops model regulations, standards and related documents for use by legal metrology authorities and industry. Then it also harmonizes national law and regulations on the performance of measuring instruments. So national laws can be harmonized and regulations on the performance will also be done. Then India's membership and OIML certificate. So India became an OIML member in 1956. So it became an OIML member in 1956, and it signed the Metric Convention in 1956 also. So OIML CS is a system for issuing, registering and using OIML certificates. Then OIML pattern approval certificate is mandatory for selling weights or measures in the international market. So if any weights or measures needs to be sold in the international market, so the certificate or the approved certificate is mandatory from OIML. Then comes next, and that is the significance of India's becoming OIML certificate authority. So what is its significance? Now ease in exports. So exports can be done easily. So Indian manufacturers can obtain certificate locally, avoiding the need to go to other countries. So the need to go to other countries can also be avoided. Now better forex reserves. So it is expected to increase exports. Can earn foreign exchange and generate employment. So if exports will be increased, then the chances of getting foreign reserve more, foreign exchange more into the country will also rise. Then neighboring countries and manufacturers can come to India for certification. So neighboring countries can also come to India for certification and contributing to revenue in terms of foreign exchange. Because when they will come to India and do their work, then there are chances of earning foreign exchange. Then the next point of surety bonds. So this was in news. Leading general insurers like the New India Assurance, SBI General Insurance, they plan to issue surety bonds. So they are planning to issue surety bonds, but they are facing some obstacles due to lack of supporting elements. So the support is not there. So the Ministry of Finance and Road Transport and Highways, they are pressuring the IRDAI, which looks into the insurance aspect of India, to encourage the insurance industry to launch surety bonds products. So they are encouraging the insurance industry to launch the surety bond products. Now understanding surety bonds. So what is the definition? Definition is that they are written agreements which are giving guarantee. So they are written agreements which are providing guarantee, compliance, payment or performance of an act. So they are bonds which says that if there is any act, so that act will be, the compliance will be done, the payment will be made and the performance of the act will also be observed. It also involves a three-party agreement, that is principal, surety and oblig. Principal means surety and oblig. Oblig means that if there is any insurance which needed to be taken, then there is a person who wants the insurance, then there is a insurance company, and then there is this hospital, or you can say any clinic which issues certificate. Now what is the function? So the surety company guarantees performance of the principal's obligations. So the principal's obligations performance can be guaranteed by the surety bonds, and it is provided by insurers to contractors for projects acting as a substitute for bank guarantees. So they will be provided by the insurers. Now what will be the aims and benefits of it? So that will be, if we talk about the aim, so it is mainly for infrastructure development to reduce indirect cost for suppliers and contractors. So basically with regard to the infrastructure development, and then the benefits can be, it protects the beneficiary against acts or events impairing the principal's obligation. So the beneficiary, it means that the person who wants the insurance, so the beneficiary will be protected with regard to the surety bonds. And the guarantees performance of various obligations including construction contract. So because the surety bonds will be giving a legal guarantee, so they will work as a guarantee. So the ultimately the positive side will be with regard to the people who want the insurance. Then impact on infrastructure projects, liquidity support. So framing rules for surety contracts addresses liquidity and funding requirements of the infrastructure sector. So infrastructure sector will get the liquidity support. Then level playing field. So this ensures the fair competition among large, mid and small contractors. So the large, mid and small contractors, there will be a competition among them, but they will have a fair competition. Now issues and challenges. First is the lack of expertise, because Indian insurers lack expertise in risk assessment for surety bonds. As of now, the market do not possess many surety bonds, so the expertise will be needed. Then uncertainties, unclear pricing, recourse against defaulting contractors, and reinsurance option deter insurers from writing such policies. So the insurers will not be very much in favor of giving these surety bonds, because in the end it is them who had to work more. Then legal framework. Indian laws do not recognize insurers' rights at par with the financial creditors, hindering enforcement in case of default. So if there is any kind of default observed, that is where the problem will be heard. Next comes the palm oil production. So the palm oil production, it was in news because the European Union has implemented the EU deforestation free regulation targeting palm oil production. So it is European Union deforestation free regulation targeting palm oil production, and Malaysia has signed a deal to double palm oil exports to China. So Malaysia has signed a deal with China to double its palm oil production and export also, to offset potential revenue losses from EU's ban on commodities linked to deforestation. So European Union has put a ban on commodities if that is related to deforestation. So with regard to it, Malaysia has signed a deal with China that it will export double palm oil to them. Then understanding European Union deforestation free regulation and reactions. So what is it? That is EU deforestation free regulation. So the aim is to remove deforestation from European Union supply chains by the year 2030. It means that anything which contributes to the process of deforestation, it means removal of trees. So the aim is to remove any processes which happens because of deforestation, and the year is 2030, and it imposes administrative burden on palm oil exporters. So the palm oil exporters countries like Malaysia, So they will have more burden to export now. And this requires products exported to EU to be grown on non-deforested land after December 31, 2020. So now the products which was grown on the deforested land will now have to be grown on the non-deforested land. And the reactions to this is that the Malaysia and Indonesia has opposed EU protectionist stance. So countries like Malaysia and Indonesia are opposing it because the pressure will be put on Malaysia and Indonesia to export more. Concerns about dependency on China for exports and potential environmental impacts. Then overview of palm oil and its use. So first is the definition. So palm oil is edible vegetable oil which is derived from oil palms fruit, which is mesocarp. So the inside of the fruit is what we find the mesocarp. So palm oil is edible vegetable oil. So it is a vegetable oil which we use in our day-to-day life, and it is derived from oil palms fruit which is known as the mesocarp. It is used in cooking, cosmetics, processed foods, biofuels, etc. Now let's talk from the perspective of production. So Indonesia and Malaysia has contributed to nearly 90% of global palm oil production. So global palm oil production, Indonesia and Malaysia have together contributed around 90%. Now what are the issues related to it? So they are criticized for unsustainable production practices and exploitative labor. So this production practice is considered to be unsustainable, and the labor where they work in very exploitative conditions. Then what is the importance of palm oil for global supply chains? So let's talk about the global production. So world's most widely used vegetable oil. So it is the world's most widely used vegetable oil with global production exceeding 73 million tons, more than 73 million tons. And Indonesia accounts for 60% of global palm oil supply. So Indonesia is the biggest supplier and it supplies more than 60% of global palm oil supply. Now, what is the status of India with regard to palm oil? So, largest importer of palm oil, meeting 40% of vegetable oil consumption. So, if Indonesia is the biggest exporter, India is the largest importer, and around 40% of vegetable oil consumption done in India is with regard to palm oil. And India has also unveiled National Mission on Edible Oil Palm in 2021. So in 2021, a national mission has been unveiled on edible oil with regard to oil palm in 2021 to boost domestic production so that we do not have to import much. Now challenges and opportunities. So what are the challenges? The challenges is that the EU regulations pose challenge for palm oil exporters, because if the deforested land cannot be used and non-deforested land have to be used. So now what will happen to the land which already the people have? Then sustainability concerns regarding production practices, because this will become very problematic for the people and for the producers who are in this business as of now. And the opportunity would be that India aims to boost domestic palm oil production through national initiatives so that they do not have to import much and their domestic production can increase. Diversification of procurement and production for sustainability. So diversification of procurement and production for sustainability, so that sustainable model can be adopted. If India will produce its own and the domestic consumption and domestic production will be high, then India needs to produce its own and India needs to increase its own production of palm oil. So these are the topics that we studied in today's episode, and this is it. So the topics that we discussed were palm oil production, surety bonds, International Organization of Legal Metallurgy, cotton production in India, then RBI to discontinue ICRR, incremental cash reserve ratio, Then comes the Gresham's law and currency exchange rate. Currency exchange rate and Gresham's law becomes very important. Palm oil is also important. So this was it from the episode 5 of economy. So for more information like these, keep on watching our episodes, and we will be coming with more topics in the upcoming episodes of economy like this. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Till we meet next time, keep reading, keep writing, and keep subscribing to the channel. Thank you.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.